And it appears we are live. What's up, everybody? It's G Mr. Drew here to welcome you to another episode of the Andrew Glowczewski Experience. It's going to be episode 247. Hopefully, I can get 3 episodes in tonight, so it'll be 48 and 49 after this. That's the goal. We'll see what happens. I know I gotta. I want to finish off this page. It's gonna just embody, just how this one weapon took up 6 slots. The next three assault rifles that I'm gonna be working on are also gonna take up 6 squares apiece. So that's gonna be a whole page and a half worth of work, which is a whole lot. I understand I always bite off more than I could chew, but this is how we think of it as a max bench or something, you got to push it to the limit to know where your limit is. So who knows? Maybe I'll get my ass kicked by the second stream. And but yeah, the goal tonight would be to do 3 streams, 3 guns. But yeah, let's get this one in. Next assault rifle. Having fun with these because I really like how there's like a handgun design in here, and then all of these attachments that the more I look at them, the more I'm getting thoughts and ideas, which is the whole point of this study, is in order to be able to push my concept design. Anyways, man, I'm G Mr. Drew at G Mr. Drew on all socials. You can follow, like, and subscribe as you watch this video. And gmrdrew.art, my website. Check it out. There's a whole bunch of work in there. As soon as I'm done with this study series, I should throw it up. I haven't updated my website in a minute. I need to do that. And also update my merch. I have a ton of designs that I want to get up there. And yeah, but either way, all that stuff is on my website. Check it out. And let's get into this. Just the camera. I got YouTube playing in the background. It's the Dune audiobooks. I've probably listened to the first half of the first book a dozen times by now. So I'm just giving it one more go. And yeah, throughout, because it's 2 10-hour videos just to cover the one first book, chances are for the rest of the night, that's all that this is going to be. It's just a bunch of me listening to Dune, working on these semi-autos. So yeah, hopefully you dig this kind of thing, man. If not, you could always turn the audio off on my videos and put on some music or something and just watch along as I draw. But either way, I've broken it down, and let's get started.
Men heretofore required in their operations have been costing them 4 times that amount. What if the Emperor gets wind of this? Halleck asked. He's very jealous of his chum profits, my lord. Plato smiled. We'll bank the entire tithe openly in the name of Shaddam IV, and deduct it legally from our levy support costs. Let the Harkonnens fight that. And we'll be ruining a few more of the locals.
Let me check something. The brightness on my screen, it looks so dark.
A grin twisted.
There we go.
Ah, my lord, a beautiful low blow. Would that I could see.
Hey, what's up, Kopagoy?
When he learns of this. The Duke turned to Howard. Thulfir, did you get those account books you said you could buy? Yes, my lord. They're being examined in detail even now. I've skimmed them, though, and can give a first approximation. Give it, then. The Harkonnens took 10 billion Solaris out of here every 330 standard days. A muted gasp ran around the table. Even the younger aides who had been betraying some...
Yeah, thanks, man.
...straighter and exchanged
I'm,
looks. Halleck murmured.
Yeah, I'm in the middle of doing some studies. As someone who's I always worked on characters. I really need to work on my props. And as I'm working on a military character, military applications like weapons and vehicles and things like that are kind of a part of the overall study for this guy. So this is just me familiarizing myself with some stuff, bodies, scopes, noses, muzzles, stocks, all that stuff. Ha! Hand over those skills. I like it. It's the point of doing these videos, man. It's let people know. Here we go. Where am I? Where am I? There I am. Okay. So people can watch along and see the process. I also update, or on my Instagram, I put a bunch of I guess like the process of my work, so you can see like the steps and stages of how like a finished piece was done. From the beginning of the process to the end. Yeah, the best thing I could say is keep drawing, man. I've been drawing for almost 30 years now, like 25 years, you know. So just keep drawing and don't be afraid to draw things that you suck at drawing, kind of like how I'm drawing these weapons. Like personally, I think I'm terrible at it just because I have a lack of knowledge when it comes to doing these. Nah, I'm damn, how old am I? I'm turning 33 this year. And fortunately, I learned that I was talented at drawing at a really early age, so I kind of stuck to it since that was kind of like my thing as when I was a kid. Oh, nice. Yeah, I got my bachelor's degree in animation. Too bad it was from a cash grab school, so it never panned out for anything or for anybody that I went to school with either. But yeah, I could tell you as far as like you're not on a bad path. Fortunately, comic books are panels and animation. Before you get a finished product in animation, you need storyboards and things like that. And with comics being so prevalent in the movies and cinema these days, you know, comic panels and storyboards are starting to become one. Where comic panels are feeding storyboards and storyboards are uh, can be considered comic panels. So the practices are similar is all I'm saying. So you can yeah, definitely find that. And get everything that you need. You study comics, you'll learn how to make some decent storyboards. And then or you could study animation, in which case you'll learn storyboarding as a part of it, and animatics and then animation, things like that. So yeah, those it's kind of like a one hand feeds the other sort of situation when it comes to those two things, which is why I do what I do. Oh, that's exactly what I'm doing. Like I said, these are all studies for a character, so it's like I've made all this stuff, and now it's once I get around to finishing all the concept art that I'm working on, yeah, that's gonna be the point is to, start creating the manga, and then let the manga serve as the storyboards in order to create animatics, and then from the animatics create a finished animation. It's a long-term project. So yeah, man, it seems like we're kind of doing the same exact thing. You're just getting to it way earlier than I am.
And then have no inhibitions against marketing an off-planet. I don't like an unanswered question of this importance, Plato said. Thuvir, I want you to give top priority to solution of this problem. We're already working on it, my lord. He cleared his throat. I heard him say one thing. He said you couldn't mistake the Fremen attitude towards shields. He said they were mostly amused by them. Lydia frowned. Then the subject under discussion is spicing equipment. Howard gestured with his aid at the projector. The Solido image of the harvester factory was replaced by a projection of a winged device that dwarfed the images of human figures around it. This is a carrier, Howard said. It's essentially a large thopter whose sole function is to deliver a factory to slice rich sands, then to rescue the factory when a sandworm appears. They always appear. Harvesting the spice is a process of getting in and getting out with as much as possible. Admirably suited to Harkonnen morality, Lydia said.
Yeah, so
And too loud.
so it's interesting.
Ornithopter
I'll
said,
say the animation is a pretty big endeavor, and depending on whether where you're starting from, as far as like what you like to draw, I would say focus on that, but branch out from there. For instance, me, I'm like I said, I'm good with characters. Like I like characters and anatomy, and I kind of got a good handle on all that.
does it mean we won't even be able to escape unshielded frigates of all
But
sizes? He shook his head sharply to drive out such thoughts. Said, let's get to the working estimate. What will our profit figure be?
you know, I've had to teach myself how to draw
Better
environments.
than operable equipment? We've worked out a first
Oh
estimate
shit,
of operating
this goes all
costs.
the way up here.
He faced naturally undepreciated figure for a clear safety margin. He cleared every hair from his
Okay.
semitras. Said, under the Harkonnens, maintenance and salaries are held at 14%. We'll be lucky to make it at 30% at first. Reinvestment of growth factors accounted for. He
So
nodded.
I've had to learn how to draw environments, which
Profitability will be reduced.
I didn't like so much in the beginning, but the more I did it, the more I started to learn how to enjoy it and how to incorporate my style and how I like to draw
He opened his eyes.
into drawing those.
Who wishes to adopt our
And
policy?
now even
We'll work in
took a step further to draw props,
military base.
which I never really understood until I met a prop artist one day, trying to get a job with DreamWorks. And I met a prop artist and, looked over their portfolio and we got to talking a little bit. And I kind of like drew an understanding of like, oh, very similar to like how I like characters and, character design and creating all that stuff.
The lack of thopter
Like
shields.
this person here likes that. So that's when it kind of like cemented in my mind, like, oh, okay, that exists out there also. You know what I mean? It's not like everybody wants to do characters,
Total provocateurs.
but a lot of people do.
Some of us will be content with far less toil. Let me use our
We're all people,
thought.
so
Our output
it
must
makes
exceed
sense that people like drawing people.
Harkonnen average. There it is, the Duke said. Exactly as we expected. We'll have to move fast with the Fremen. We'd like 5 full battalions of Fremen troops before the first Chosen audit. That's not much time, sir, Howard said. We don't have much time, as you well know. They'll be here with Sardaukar disguised as Harkonnens at first opportunity. How many do you think they'll ship in, Thuvir? 4 or 5 battalions at most.
Homeschooled, figure out what I want to do because I
Single troop transport costs being what they are. And 5 battalions of
no
Fremen
9 to
plus
4
armed
school.
forces or delivered.
Yeah, man, that's
Including captives
Don't let that go to waste. I wish I had something like that. Better with objects? Okay, so yeah, man. I mean, I don't know, I'm just gonna guess. Like, you probably like prop designs, like drawing like, I don't know, lanterns and teacups and tables and chairs and shit like that. Shouldn't say shit like that. You know what I mean. I sound so. That's- that sounded so bad. Shit like that. But you know what I mean. Like that's stuff that I never drew in my life. You know what I mean? And now I'm like old and wanting to create all these things, and then when all you can do is draw characters and then you have to draw a scene, it gets extremely difficult, to try to imagine what kind of cups would be in here, what kind of lighting would be in here, what kind of lights. Are they overhead lights? Are they lanterns? Are they, lights on the wall, or is it lit from the floor? Like there's all sorts of crazy things, and it's like that's where, artists like you, or artists that focus on like props and just environment stuff, where, they come in handy. You would never have a character artist working on prop stuff, unless you're like me and unsuccessful and then have to force yourself to kind of just do the shit. So yeah, I learn all this stuff and then I try to let it feed my imagination. So just like I'm creating my own world, creating my own characters, I'm studying props in order to learn how to make them. Make my own weapons, make my own machines and things like that. What's cool about working from props and you want to make animations is like, you know, eventually you're gonna have to make a character in order to, give something, uh, give a, I don't know, protagonist to your story. And, I think about like objects as characters, like Brave Little Toaster, or like all the how like Beauty and the Beast, they had like a candle, a person turned into a candle and a person turned into a teapot. Like you can create characters that are props, you know what I mean? And then so you can take like a prop thing, like let's say a teapot, for instance, and then be like, I'm gonna turn this teapot into a person, and now you can have this very interesting shape to a character. And kind of give you a leg up on like creativity and all that other stuff. So yeah, don't be like dissuaded, or don't think, that you may not be able to do it. You absolutely can, man. Just like I believe I can absolutely make some decent props and make some decent weapons once I get done understanding, like, before drawing all these things. And, this gun study actually just started recently. Like, it's only been like the last few videos. But just drawing these things lately, it's. I'm not really understanding it more than I used to. Like, I'm not becoming a gun expert or anything like that. It's just understanding, kind of like, there's a build, just trying to understand it from a very clueless point of view. I don't know if that makes any sense. But like before I started this study, all this sort of stuff used to just be like noise. Like I wouldn't be able to draw a gun. Like if someone said draw a gun, I'd be like, there's gonna be like lines. I know there's straight lines involved. I know there's a handle, a trigger, you know, a blowhole for the bullet to pass through. You know, it's like I kind of have ideas of what a gun looks like, but I couldn't do that. So hopefully when I'm done with all this stuff, at least if I ever had to draw a weapon, like on the spot, you know, hopefully I'll be able to do that, at least do that much.
I remind you, this is the blade of one who befriended you. In the waiting silence, awe surrounded the man, sensing the aura of power radiating from him. He was a leader, a Fremen leader. A man near the center of the table across from Paul muttered, "Who is he to tell us what right we have on Arrakis? It is said that the Duke Leto Atreides rules with the consent of the government," the Fremen said. "Thus I must tell you the way it is with us. A certain responsibility falls on those who have seen our coastline." He cast a dark glance across the
Okay.
table. "They are ours. They may never leave Arrakis without our consent." Panic in several of the others started to rise, angry expressions on their faces. Khaled said, "The Duke Leto determines whether—" "One moment, please," Leto said, and the very mildness of his voice held them. "This must not get out of hand," he addressed himself to the Fremen. "Sir, I honor and respect the personal dignity of any man who respects my dignity. I am indeed indebted to you, and I always pay my debts. If it is your custom that this knight remain sheathed here, then it is so ordered by me. And if there is any other way we may honor the man who died in our service, you have but to name it." The Fremen stared at the Duke, then slowly pulled aside his veil, revealing a thin nose and full lip on a thin and glistening black beard. Deliberately, he bent over the end of the table, stabbed on its polished surface. As the men around the table started to surge to their feet, Idaho's voice boomed across the room. "Hold!" Into the sudden charged stillness, Idaho said, "We thank you, Stilgar, for the life of your boy's moisture. We accept it in the spirit with which it is given." And Idaho spat on the table in front of the Duke. Aside to the Duke, he said, "Remember how precious water is here, sire. That was a token of respect." Leto sank back into his own chair, caught Paul's arm. A rueful grin on his son's face, sensed a slow relaxation of tension around the table as understanding came to his men. The Fremen looked at Idaho, said, "You measured well in my siege, Duncan Idaho. Is there a bond on your allegiance to your Duke?" "He's asking me to enlist with him, sire," Idaho said. "Will he accept a dual allegiance?" Leto asked. "You wish me to go with him, sire?" "I wish you to make your own decision in the matter," Leto said, and he could not keep the urgency out of his voice. Idaho studied the Fremen. "Will you have me under these conditions, Stilgar? There'll be times when I have to return to serve my Duke." "Quite well. You did your best for our friend," Stilgar said. He looked at Leto. "Let it be thus. The man Idaho keeps the crisp knife he holds as a mark of his allegiance to us. He must pay pledge, of course, and the rites observed, but this can be done. He will be Fremen and soldier of the Atreides. There is precedent for this. Yet serves two masters." Leto asked. "I understand, sir," Idaho said.
You know, for instance, while I draw these things,
"Your water is ours,
I
Duncan.
try to think of different types of weapons,
Body of our friend
how I can apply these shapes
water is a
and squash and stretch them into other shapes that can be utilized as other weapons, you know, and other tools. And it doesn't even just have to be weapons. You know, weapons at the end of the day are just tools. You know, they're tools for war, but they're tools nonetheless. Just like, you know, you can have a tool shed to build a house.
You are friends of tools. Silver started to turn away. Will you not stay a while? Later answered. The Fremen turned back, whipping his veil into place with a casual gesture, adjusting something beneath it. Paul glimpsed what looked like a thin tube before the veil settled into place. Is there reason to stay? The Fremen asked. We would honor you, the Duke said. Honor requires that I be elsewhere soon, the Fremen said. He shot another glance at Idaho, whirled and strode out past the door guards. If the other Fremen match him, we'll serve each other well, the native said. Idaho spoke in a dry voice. He's a fair sample, sire. You understand what you're to do, Duncan. I'm your ambassador to the Fremen, sire. Much depends on you, Duncan. We're going to need at least 5 battalions of those people before the Sardaukar descend on us. It is going to take some doing, sire. The Fremen are a pretty independent bunch. Idaho hesitated. Then, and, sire, there's one other thing. One of the mercenaries we knocked over was trying to get this blade from our dead Fremen friend. The mercenary says there's a Harkonnen reward of 1,000,000 Solaris for anyone who'll bring in a single crystal. Plato's chin came up in a movement of obvious surprise. Why do they want one of those blades so badly? The knife is ground from a sandworm's tooth. It's the mark of the Fremen, sire. With it, a blue-eyed man could penetrate any sietch in the land. They question me unless I were known. I don't look Fremen, but Peter de Vries, the Duke said. A man of devilish cunning, my lord, Hart said. Idaho slipped the sheath knife beneath his tunic. Guard that knife, the Duke said. I understand, my lord. He patted the transceiver on his belt. I'll report as soon as possible. Duvay has my call code. Use battle language. He saluted, spun about, and hurried out for the throne. They heard his footsteps drumming down the corridor. A look of understanding passed between Leto and Howard. They smiled. We've much to do, sire, Howard said. And I keep you from your work, Leto said. I heard the report on the advanced bases, Howard said. Shall I give it another time, sire? Will it take long? Not for a briefing. It seemed to the Fremen that there were more than 200 of these
Where am I
advanced
at? Where am I
bases
at?
clearing the
There we go.
botanical testing station area. All supposedly have been abandoned. There are reports they were sealed off before being abandoned. Equipment in them? The Duke asked. According to the reports I heard from Duncan. Where are they located? Duncan asked. The answer to that question, Howard said, is invariably Liek knows. God knows, Leto muttered. Perhaps not, sire, Howard said. You heard this Stilgar use the name. seemed so sure of herself. And the message, Mother, precautions have been taken, he said. He looked around the room, and all marked the hunted wildness in his father's eyes. Remain here. There are some things about the command posts I want to discuss with Thulfir. He turned, strode out of the room, nodding shortly at the door guards. All stared at the place where his father had stood. The space had been empty even before the Duke left the room. And he recalled the old woman's warning. But the father said nothing.
On that first day when Muad'Dib rode through the streets of Erechim with his family, some of the people along the way recalled the legends and the prophecy, and they ventured to shout Mahdi. But their shout was more a question than a statement, for as yet they could only hope he was the one foretold as the Lisan al-Gaib, the voice from the outer world. Their attention was focused, too, on the mother, because they had heard she was a Bene Gesserit, and it was obvious to them that she was like the other Lisan al-Gaib. From Manual of Muad'Dib by the Princess Irulan.
The Duke found Thulfir alone in the corner, to which a guard directed. There was the sound of men setting up communications equipment in an adjoining room, but this place was very quiet. The Duke glanced around as Howard arose from a footmat at the table. It was a green walled enclosure with, in addition to the table, 3 suspensor chairs from which the Harkonnen H had been hastily removed, leaving an imperfect cover bench.
The chairs are liberated, but quite safe. Where is Paul, sire?
I left him in the conference room. I'm hoping he'll get some rest without me there to distract him.
Howard nodded, crossed to the door to the adjoining room, closed it, shutting off the noise of static and electronic stuff.
Thulfir, the Imperial and Harkonnen stockpiles of spice attract my attention.
My lord,
The Duke pursed his lips.
Storehouses are susceptible to destruction.
He raised a hand as Howard started to speak.
Ignore the Emperor's horde. He'd secretly enjoy it if the Harkonnens were embarrassed. And can the Baron object if something is destroyed which he cannot openly admit he has?
we've few men to spare, sire.
Use some of Idaho's land. And perhaps some of the Fremen would enjoy a trip off-planet. A raid would be a permanent. There are tactical advantages to such diversion, Thulfir.
As you say, my lord.
Howard turned away, and the Duke saw evidence of nervousness in the old man, thought, perhaps he suspects I distrust him. You must know I have private reports of traitors. Well, best quiet his fears immediately.
Thulfir, since you're one of the few I can trust completely, there's another matter bears discussion. We both know how constant a watch we must keep to prevent traitors from infiltrating our forces. But I have 2 new reports.
Howard turned, stared at him, and later repeated the stories word for word. Instead of bringing on the intense mental concentration, the reports only increased Howard's agitation. Plato studied the old man.
You've been holding something back, old man. I should have suspected when you were so nervous during staff. What is it that was too hot to dump in front of the full conference?
Howard's sapphire-stained lips were pulled into a prim, straight line with tiny wrinkles radiating into them.
My lord, I don't quite know how to broach this.
We've suffered many a scar for each other, Thulfir. I know you can broach any subject.
Howard continued to stare at him, thinking, this is how I like him best. This is the man of honor who deserves every bit of my loyalty and service. Why must I hurt him?
Well,
It's a scrap of note. We took it from a Harkonnen courier. The note was intended for an agent named Pardy. We've good reason to believe Pardy was top man in the Harkonnen underground here. The note, it's the thing that could have great consequence or no consequence. It's susceptible to various interpretations.
what's the delicate content of this note?
Scrap of note, my lord. Incomplete. It was on mimic film with the usual destruction capsule attached. We stopped the acid action just short of full erasure, leaving only a fragment. The fragment, however, is extremely suggestive.
Yes. However rough it is.
It says, Ato will never suspect, and when the blow falls on him from a beloved hand, its source alone should be enough to destroy him. The note was under the Baron's own seal, and I authenticated the seal.
Your suspicion is obvious.
I'd sooner cut off my arms than hurt you. My lord, what if
The lady, Jessica. Couldn't you wring the facts out of this party?
unfortunately Party no longer was among the living when we intercepted the courier? The courier, I'm certain, did not know what he carried.
I see.
Vico shook his head, thinking, what slimy piece of business. There can't be anything in it. I know my woman.
My lord, if
No! There's a mistake here.
we cannot ignore it, my lord.
She's been with me for 16 years. There have been countless opportunities where you yourself investigated the school and the woman.
Things have been known to escape me.
It's impossible.
Okay.
The Harkonnens want to destroy the Atreides line, meaning all two. They've already tried once. Could a woman conspire against her own son?
Perhaps she doesn't conspire against her son, and yesterday's attempt could have been a clever sham.
It couldn't have been a sham.
Sire, she isn't supposed to know her parentage, but what if she does know? What if she were an orphan, say, orphaned by an Atreides?
She'd have moved long before that. Poison in my drink, a stiletto at night. Who has had better opportunity?
The Harkonnens mean to destroy you, my lord. Their intent is not just to kill. There's a range of fine distinctions in Conley. This could be a work of art among vendettas.
The Duke's shoulders
A
slumped.
work of art among vendettas. God damn. This shit is stressful.
A woman has opened her heart to me.
What better way to destroy me than to sow suspicion of the woman I love?
An interpretation I've considered. Still,
The Duke opened his eyes, stared at her.
Okay.
Let him be suspicious. Suspicion is his trade, not mine. Perhaps if I appear to believe this, that will make him.
Oh.
What do you suggest?
on our constant surveillance, my lord, she should be watched at all times. I will see it's done unobtrusively. Idaho would be the ideal choice for the job. Perhaps in a week or so we can bring him back. There's a young man we've been training in Idaho's troop who might be ideal to send to the Fremen as a replacement. He's gifted in diplomacy.
Don't jeopardize our foothold.
Of course
6.
There were corridors with stairs and balconies and halls. People who saluted and stood aside for him. In time he came back to the conference room, found it dark, and Paul asleep on the table with a guard's robe thrown over him and a ditty pack over it. The Duke walked softly down the length of the room and onto the balcony overlooking the landing field. A guard at the corner of the balcony, recognizing the Duke by the dim reflection of lights from the field, snapped to attention. At ease, the Duke murmured. He leaned against the cold metal of the balcony railing. A pre-dawn hush had come over the desert basement. He looked up. Straight overhead, the stars of a sequined shore flung over blue black. Low on the southern horizon, the night's second moon appeared through a thin dust haze, an unbelieving moon that looked at him with a cynical light. As the Duke watched, the moon dipped beneath the shield-wall cliffs, frosty, and in the sudden intensity of darkness, he experienced a chill. He shivered. Anger shot through him. The Harkonnens have hindered and hounded and hunted me for the last time, he thought. They are dung heaps with village provost mines. Here I make my stand. And he thought with a touch of sadness, I must rule with eye and claw, as a hawk among the lesser birds. Unconsciously, his hand brushed the hawk emblem on his thigh. To the east, the night grew a faggot of luminous grey, then seashell opalescence that dimmed the stars. There came the long, bell-tolling movement of dawn striking across a broken horizon. It was a scene of such beauty, it caught all his attention. Some things beggar likeness, he thought. He had never imagined anything here could be as beautiful as that shattered red horizon and the purple and ochre cliffs. Beyond the landing field, where the night's faint dew had touched life into the hurried seeds of arachis, he saw great puddles of red blooms, and, running through them, an articulate tread of violet, like giant footsteps. "It's a beautiful morning, sire," the guard said. "Yes, it is." The Duke nodded, thinking, perhaps this planet could grow on one. Perhaps it could become a good home for my son. Then he saw the human figures moving into the flower fields, sweeping them with strange scythe-like devices. Dew gatherers. Water so precious here that even the dew must be collected. And it could be a hideous place, the Duke thought.
There is probably no more terrible instant of enlightenment than the one in which you discover your father is a man with human flesh. From Collected Sayings of Muad'Dib by the Princess Irulan.
The Duke said, "Oh, I'm doing a hateful thing, but I must." He stood beside the portable poison smoke and brought into the conference room for their breakfast. The thing's sensor arms hung limp at the end of the table, reminding Paul of some weird insect newly dead. The Duke's attention was directed out the windows of the landing field and its roiling of dust against the morning sky. Paul had a viewer in front of him containing a short film clip on drowned religious practices. The clip had been compiled by one of Howard's experts, and Paul found himself disturbed by the references to himself. Maki, Lisan al-Garim.
he was disturbed. He led me down the hall of portraits to the ego-likeness of the Duke Leto Atreides. I marked the strong resemblance between them, my father and this man in the portrait, both with thin, elegant faces and sharp features dominated by cold eyes.
What?
Princess daughter, my father said, I would that you'd been older when it came time for this man to choose a woman. My father was 71 at the time, and looking no older than the man in the portrait, and I was but 14. Yet I remember deducing in that instant that my father secretly wished the Duke had been his son, and disliked the political necessities that made them enemies. In My Father's House by Princess Irulan.
His first encounter with the people he had been ordered to betray left Dr. Kimes shaken. He prided himself on being a scientist to whom legends were merely interesting clues pointing toward cultural roots. Yet the boy fitted the ancient prophecy so precisely. He had the questing eyes and the air of reserved candor. Of course, the prophecy left certain latitude as to whether
ignore this. Let's keep going.
With your permission, sire, I must check the security of your suits. The Duke started to speak, but Kynes pressed on. I have concern for my own flesh as well as yours, my lord. I'm well aware of whose throat with this slit should come before you two while you're in my care. The Duke frowned, thinking, how delicate this sounds. If I refuse, it may offend him, and this would be a man whose value to me is beyond measure. Yet, to let him inside my shield, clutching my purse, when I know so little about him. The thoughts flicked through his mind with decision hard on their heels. Well, in your hands, the Duke said. He stepped forward, opening his robe, saw Halleck come up on the balls of his feet, poised and alert, but remaining where he was. And, if you be so kind, the Duke said, I appreciate an explanation of the suit from one who lives so intimately with it. Certainly, Kynes said. He felt up under the robe the shoulder seals, speaking as he examined the suit. It's basically a micro sandwich. A high-efficiency filter and heat exchange system. He adjusted the shoulder seals. The skin contact layers and pores. Respiration passes through it, having cooled the body. Near normal evaporation process. The next two layers, Kynes tightened the chest fit, include heat exchange filaments and salt precipitators. Salts reclaimed. The Duke lifted his arms in a gesture that said, most interesting. Breathe deeply, Kynes said. The Duke obeyed. Kynes studied the underarm seams, adjusting. Motions of the body, especially breathing, he said, and some osmotic action provide the pumping force. He loosened the chest fit slightly. Reclaimed water circulates to catch pockets from which you draw it through this tube in the clip at your neck. The Duke twisted his chin in and down to look at the end of the tube. Efficient and convenient, he said. Good engineering. Kynes knelt, examined the leg seals. Urine and feces are processed in the thigh pads, he said, and stood up, felt the neck fitting, lifted a sectioned flap. In the open desert, you wear this filter across your face. This tube in the nostrils with these plugs to ensure a tight fit. Breathe in through the mouth filter, out through the nose tube. With a Fremen suit in good working order, you won't lose more than a thimbleful of moisture a day, even if you're caught in the Great Urn. A thimbleful a day, the Duke said. Kynes pressed a finger against the suit's forehead and said, this may rather little. If it irritates you, please tell me. I could slit patch it a bit tighter. My thanks, the Duke said. He moved his shoulders in the suit as Kynes stepped back, realizing that it did feel better now. Tighter and less irritating. Kynes turned to look. Now, let's have a look at you, lad. Good man, but he'll have to learn to address us properly, the Duke thought. All stood passively as Kynes inspected the suit. It had been an odd sensation putting on the crinkly, slick surface cover. In his foreconsciousness had been the absolute knowledge that he had never before worn a still suit. Yet, each motion of adjusting the adhesion tabs under Gurney's inexpert guidance seemed natural, instinctive. When he had tightened the chest,
Oh my, almost off the screen. Sorry.
he had measured what he did, and why. When he had fitted the neck and forehead tabs tightly, he had known it was to prevent friction blisters. Kynes straightened, stepped back with a puzzled expression. You've worn a still suit before? He asked. This is the first time. Then someone adjusted it for you? No. Your desert boots are fitted slip fashion at the ankles. Who told you to do that? It seemed the right way.
What? What happened? I was. Oh, come on. I'm all up into the story. It's all cutting off. Come on now.
It was as though someone had dropped this grunt from space and left it where it snapped. They crossed a shallow basin with a clear outline of grey sand spreading across it from a canyon opening to the sun. The sand fingers ran out into the basin, a dry delta outlined against the dark. Kynes sat back, thinking about the water sand must be dangerous if you fly into it, Paul said. Will it really cut the strongest metals? At this altitude, it's not sand, but dust, Kynes said. The danger is lack of visibility, turbulence, clogged intakes. We'll see actual spice mining today? Paul asked. Very likely, Kynes said. Paul sat back. He had used the questions, hyper-awareness, to do what his mother called registering person. He had Kynes that turned the voice, each detail of face and gesture. An unnatural folding of the left sleeve on the man's robe would reveal a knife in an arm sheath. The waist, large and sturdy. It was said that desert men wore a belted sash in which they tucked small necessities. Perhaps the bulges came from such a sash. Certainly not from a concealed shield belt. A copper pin engraved with the likeness of a hair clasped the neck of Kynes' robe. Another smaller pin with similar likeness under the corner of the hood, which was thrown back over his shoulder. Alec twisted in the seat beside Paul, reached back into the rear compartment and pulled out his medicine. Kynes looked around as Alec cued the instrument, then returned his attention to their course. What would you like to hear, young master? Alec asked. YouTube scan, Paul said. Alec bent his ear close to the sounding board, strummed a chord, and sang softly. Our fathers ate manna in the desert, in the burning places where whirlwinds hail. Lord, save us from that horrible land. Save us, oh, save us from the dry and thirsty land. Kynes glanced at the Duke and said, "They do travel with a light complement of guards, my lord. Are all of them such men of many talents?" Gurney, the Duke chuckled. Gurney is one of a kind. I like him only for his eyes. His eyes miss very little. The paleontologist frowned. Without missing a beat in his tune, Alec interposed. I'm like an owl of the desert, oh. I am like an owl of the desert. The Duke reached out, brought out a microphone from the instrument panel, hummed it to life, said, "Leader to escort, Gemma. Flying object at 9 o'clock sector B. You identified?" "It's merely a bird," Kynes said, and added, "You have sharp eyes." The panel speaker crackled. Then, "Escort, Gemma. Object examined under full amplification. It's a large bird." Paul looked in the indicated direction, saw the distant sky, a dot of intermittent motion, and realized how keyed up his father must be. Every sense was at full alert. "I'd not realized there were birds that large, this far into the desert," the Duke said. "That's likely an eagle," Kynes said. "Many creatures have adapted to this place." The ornithopter swept over a bare rock plain. Paul looked down from their 2,000 meters altitude, saw the wrinkled shadow of their craft and escort. The land beneath seemed flat, but shadow wrinkles said otherwise. "Has anyone ever walked out of the desert?" the Duke asked. Alec's music stopped. He leaned forward to catch the answer. "Not from the deep desert," Kynes said. "Men have walked out of the second zone several times. They've survived by crossing the rock areas where worms seldom go." The timbre of Kynes' voice held Paul's attention. He felt his senses come alert, the way they were trained to do. "Ah, the worms," the Duke said. "I must see one sometime." "You may see one today," Kynes said. "Wherever there is spice, there are worms." "Always?" Alec asked. "Always." "Is there a relationship between worm and spice?" the Duke asked. Kynes turned, and Paul saw the pursed lips as the man spoke. "They defend spice sands. Each worm has a territory. As for the spice, who knows? Worm specimens we've examined lead us to suspect complicated chemical interchanges within them. We find traces of hydrochloric acid in the ducts, more complicated acid forms elsewhere. I'll give you my monograph on the subject." "And a shield's no defense?" the Duke asked. "Shields?" Kynes sneered. "Activate a shield within the worm zone and seal your fate. Worms ignore territory lines, come from far around to attack a shield. No man wearing a shield has ever survived such attack. How are worms taken then? High voltage electrical shock applied separately to each ring segment is the only known way of killing and preserving an entire worm, Kind said. They can be stunned and shattered by explosives, but each ring segment has a life of its own. Barring atomics, I know of no explosive powerful enough to destroy a large worm entirely. They're incredibly tough. Why hasn't an effort been made to wipe them out? Paul asked. Too expensive, Kind said. Too much area to cover. Paul leaned back in his corner. His truth sense, awareness of tone shadings, told him that Kynes was lying and telling half-truths. And he thought, if there's a relationship between spice and worms, killing the worms would destroy the spice. No one will have to walk out of the desert soon, the Duke said. Trip these little transmitters at our necks and rescue is on its way. All our workers will be wearing them before long. We're setting up a special rescue service. Very commendable, Kynes said. Your tone says you don't agree, the Duke said. Agree? Of course I agree, but it won't be much use. Static electricity from sandstorms masks out many signals. Transmitters short out. They've been tried here before, you know. Arrakis is tough on equipment. And if a worm's hunting you, there's not much time. Frequently, you have no more than 15 or 20 minutes. What would you advise? The Duke asked. You ask my advice? As planetologist, yes. You'd follow my advice? If I found it sensible. Very well, my lord. Never travel alone. The Duke turned his attention from the controls. That's all? That's all. Never travel alone. What if you're separated by a storm and forced down? Halleck asked. Isn't there anything you can do? Anything covers much territory, Kynes said. What would you do? Paul asked. Kynes turned a hard stare at the boy, brought his attention back to the Duke. I'd remember to protect the integrity of my still suit. If I were outside the worm zone, or in rock, I'd stay with the ship. If I were down in open sand, I'd get away from the ship as fast as I could. About 1,000 meters would be far enough. Then I'd hide beneath my robe. A worm would get the ship, but it might miss me. Then what? Halleck asked. Kynes shrugged. Wait for the worm to leave. That's all? Paul asked. When the worm has gone, one may try to walk out, Kynes said. You must walk softly. Avoid drum sands, tidal dust basins. Head for the nearest rock zone. There are many such zones. You might make it. Drum sand? Halleck asked. A condition of sand compaction, Kynes said. The slightest step sets it drumming. Worms always come to that. And a tidal dust basin? The Duke asked. Certain depressions in the desert are filled with dust over the centuries. They are so vast, they have currents and tides. All will swallow the unwary who step into them. Halleck sat back, resumed strumming the balisette. Presently he sang, Wild beasts of the desert do hunt there, waiting for the innocents to pass. Oh, tempt not the gods of the desert, lest you seek a lonely epitaph. The perils of the... He broke off, leaned forward. Dust cloud ahead, sire. I see it, Gurney. That's what we see, Kynes said. Paul stretched up in the seat to peer ahead. Saw a rolling yellow cloud low on the desert surface some 30 kilometers ahead. One of your factory crawlers, Kynes said. It's on the surface, and that means it's on spice. The cloud is vented sand being expelled after the spice has been centrifugally removed. There's no other cloud quite like it. Aircraft over it, the Duke said. I see 2, 3, 4 spotters, Kynes said. They're watching for worm sign. Worm sign? The Duke asked. A sand wave moving toward the crawler. They'll have seismic probes on the surface, too. Worms sometimes travel too deep for the wave to show. Kynes swung his gaze around the sky. Should be a carry-all wing around, but I don't see it. A worm always comes, eh? Halleck asked. Always. Paul leaned forward, touched Kynes' shoulder. How big an area does each worm stake out? Kynes frowned. The child kept asking adult questions. That depends on the size of the worm. What's the variation? The Duke asked. Big ones may control 300 or 400 square kilometers. Small ones... He broke off as the Duke kicked on the jet brakes. The ship bucked as its tail pods whispered to silence. Stub wings elongated, cupped the air. The craft became a full thopter as the Duke banked it, holding the wings to a gentle beat, pointing with his left hand off to the east, beyond the factory crawler. Is that worm sign? Kynes leaned across the Duke to peer into the distance. Paul and Halleck were crowded together, looking in the same direction, and Paul noted that their escort, caught by the sudden maneuver, had surged ahead, but now was curving back. The factory crawler lay ahead of them, still some 3 kilometers away. Where the Duke pointed, crescent dune tracks spread shadow ripples toward the horizon, and running through them as a level line stretching into the distance came an elongated mount in motion, a cresting of sand. It reminded Paul of the way a big fish disturbed the water when swimming just under the surface. Worm, Kynes said. Big one. He leaned back, grabbed the microphone from a panel, punched out a new frequency selection. Glancing at the grid chart on rollers over their heads, he spoke into the microphone. Calling crawler at Delta Ajax 9er. Worm sign warning. Crawler at Delta Ajax 9er. Worm sign warning. Acknowledge, please. He waited. The panel speaker emitted static crackles. Then a voice. Who calls Delta Ajax 9er? Over. They seemed pretty calm about it, Halleck said. Kynes spoke into the microphone. Unlisted flight, north and east of you about 3 kilometers. Worm sign is on intercept course. Your position, estimated contact 25 minutes. Another voice rumbled from the speaker. This is spotter control. Sighting confirmed. Stand by for contact fixed. There was a pause, then contact in 26 minutes minus. That was a sharp estimate. Who's on that unlisted flight? Over. Halleck had his harness off and surged forward between Kynes and the Duke. Is this the regular working frequency, Kynes? Yes. Why? Who'd be listening? Just the work areas in this area. Cuts down interference. Again, the speaker crackled. Then, this is Delta Ajax 9er. Who gets bonus credit for that spot? Over. Halleck glanced at the Duke. Kynes said, there's a bonus based on spice load for whoever gives first worm warning. They want to know. Tell them who had first sight of that worm, Halleck said. The Duke nodded. Kynes hesitated, then lifted the microphone. Spotter credit to the Duke Leto Atreides. The Duke Leto Atreides, over. The voice from the speaker was flat and partly distorted by a burst of static. Read and thank you. Now, tell them to divide the bonus among themselves, Halleck ordered. Tell them it's the Duke's wish. Kynes took a deep breath, then... It's the Duke's wish that you divide the bonus among your crew. Do you read? Over. Acknowledged and thank you, the speaker said. The Duke said, I forgot to mention that Gurney is also very talented in public relations. Kynes turned a puzzled frown on Halleck. This lets the men know their Duke is concerned for their safety, Halleck said. Word will get around. It was on an area working frequency, not likely Harkonnen agents heard. He glanced out at their air cover. And we're a pretty strong force. It was a good risk. The Duke banked their craft toward the sand cloud erupting from the factory crawler. What happens now? There's a carry-all wing somewhere close, Kynes said. It'll come in and lift off the crawler. What if the carry-all's wrecked? Halleck asked. Some equipment is lost, Kynes said. Get in close over the crawler, my lord. You'll find this interesting. The Duke scowled, busied himself with the controls as they came into turbulent air over the crawler. Paul looked down, saw sand still spewing out of the metal and plastic monster beneath them. It looked like a great tan and blue beetle with many wide tracks extending on arms around it. He saw a giant inverted funnel snout poked into dark sand in front of it. Rich spice fed by the colour, Kynes said. They'll continue working until the last minute. The Duke fed more power to the wings, stiffened them for a steeper descent as he settled lower in a circling glide above the crawler. A glance left and right showed his cover holding altitude and circling overhead. Paul studied the yellow cloud belching from the crawler's pipe vents. looked out over the desert at the approaching worm track. Shouldn't we be hearing them call in the carrier? Halleck asked. They usually have the wing on a different frequency, Kynes said. Shouldn't they have 2 carriers standing by for every crawler? The Duke asked. There should be 26 men on that machine down there, not to mention the cost of equipment. Kynes said, You don't have enough He broke off as the speaker erupted with an angry voice. Any of you see the wing? He isn't answering. A garble of noise crackled from the speaker, drowned in an abrupt override signal, then silence, and the first voice. Report by the numbers, over. Is his spotter control? Last I saw the wing was pretty high and circling off northwest. I don't see him now, over. Spotter 1, negative, over. Spotter 2, negative, over. Spotter 3, negative, over. Silence. The Duke looked down. His own craft's shadow was just passing over the crawler. Only 4 spotters, is that right? Correct, Kynes said. There are 5 in our party, the Duke said. Our ships are larger. We can crowd in 3 extra each. Their spotters ought to be able to lift off 2 each. Paul did the mental arithmetic, said, That's 3 short. Why don't they have 2 carryalls to each crawler? Barked the Duke. You don't have enough extra equipment, Kynes said. All the more reason we should protect what we have. Where could that carryall go? Halleck asked. Could have been forced down somewhere out of sight, Kynes said. The Duke grabbed the microphone, hesitated, with thumb poised over its switch. How could they lose sight of a carryall? They keep their attention on the ground, looking for worm sign, Kynes said. The Duke thumbed the switch, spoke into the microphone. This is your Duke. We are coming down to take off Delta Ajax 9's crew. All spotters are ordered to comply. Spotters will land on the east side. We will take the west. Over. He reached down, punched out his own command frequency, repeated the order for his own air cover, handed the microphone back to Kynes. Kynes returned to the working frequency, and a voice blasted from the speaker. Almost a full load of spice. We have almost a full load. We can't leave that for a damned worm. Over. Damn the spice, the Duke barked. He grabbed back the microphone, said, We can always get more spice. There are seats in our ships for all but 3 of you. Draw straws or decide any way you like who's to go. But you're going, and that's an order. He slammed the microphone back into Kynes' hands, muttered, Sorry, as Kynes shook an injured finger. How much time? Paul asked. 9 minutes, Kynes said. The Duke said, This ship has more power than the others. If we took off under jet with 3/4 wings, we could crowd in an additional man. That sounds soft, Kynes said. With 4 extra men aboard on a jet takeoff, we could snap the wings, sire, Halleck said. Not on this ship, the Duke said. He hauled back on the controls as the Thopter glided in beside the crawler. The wings ticked up, braked the Thopter to a skidding stop within 20 meters of the factory. The crawler was silent now, no sand spouting from its vents. Only a faint mechanical rumble issued from it, becoming more audible as the Duke opened his door. Immediately their nostrils were assailed by the odor of cinnamon, heavy and pungent. With a loud flapping, the spotter aircraft glided down to the sand on the other side of the crawler. The Duke's own escort swooped in to land in line with him. Paul, looking out at the factory, saw how all the Thopters were dwarfed by gnats beside a warrior beetle. Gurney, you and Paul toss out that rear seat, the Duke said. He manually cranked the wings out to 3/4, set their angle, checked the jet pod controls. Why the devil aren't they coming out of that machine? They're hoping the carryall will show up, Kynes said. They still have a few minutes. He glanced off to the east. All turned to look the same direction, seeing no sign of the worm, but there was a heavy, charged feeling of anxiety in the air. The Duke took the microphone, punched for his command frequency, said, 2 of you toss out your shield generators. By the numbers. You can carry 1 more man that way. We're not leaving any men for that monster. He keyed back to the working frequency, barked, All right, you and Delta Ajax 9 out, now. This is a command from your Duke. On the double, or I'll cut that crawler apart with a laser gun. A hatch snapped open near the front of the factory, another at the rear, another at the top. Men came tumbling out, sliding and scrambling down to the sand. A tall man in a patched working robe was the last to emerge. He jumped down to a track and then to the sand. The Duke hung the microphone on the panel, swung out onto the wing step, shouted, 2 men each into your spotters! The man in the patched robe began calling off pairs of his crew, pushing them toward the craft waiting on the other side. 4 over here! The Duke shouted. 4 into that ship back there! He jabbed a finger at an escort thopter directly behind him. The guards were just wresting the shield generator out of it. And 4 into that ship over there! He pointed to the other escort that had shed its shield generator. 3 each into the others. Run, you sand dogs! The tall man finished counting off his crew, came slogging across the sand, followed by 3 of his companions. I hear the worm, but I can't see it, Kynes said. The others heard it then, an abrasive slithering, distant and growing louder. Damn sloppy way to operate, the Duke muttered. Aircraft began flapping off the sand around them. It reminded the Duke of a time in his home planet's jungles, a sudden emergence into a clearing and carrion birds lifting away from the carcass of a wild ox. The spice workers slogged up to the side of the thopter, started climbing in behind the Duke. Haddock helped, dragging them into the rear. In you go, boys, he snapped. On a double! Paul, crowded into a corner by sweating men, smelled the perspiration of fear, saw that 2 of the men had poor neck adjustments on their still suits. He filed the information in his memory for future action. His father would have to order tighter still suit discipline. Men tended to become sloppy if you didn't watch such things. The last man came gasping into the rear, said, A worm! It's almost on us! Blast off! The Duke slid into his seat, frowning, said, We still have almost 3 minutes on the original contact estimate. Is that right, Kynes? He shut his door, checked it. Almost exactly, my lord, Kynes said. And he thought, a cool one, this Duke. All secure here, sir, Alex said. The Duke nodded, watched the last of his escort take off. He adjusted the igniter, glanced once more at wings and instruments, punched the jet sequence. The takeoff pressed the Duke and Kynes deep into their seats, compressed the people in the rear. Kynes watched the way the Duke handled the controls, gently, surely. The thopter was fully airborne now, and the Duke studied his instruments, glanced left and right at his wings. She's very heavy, sire, Alex said. Well within the tolerances of this ship, the Duke said. You didn't really think I'd risk this cargo, did you, Gurney? Halleck grinned, said, Not a bit of it, sire. The Duke banked his craft in a long, easy curve, climbing over the crawler. Paul, crouched into a corner beside a window, stared down at the silent machine on the sand. The worm sign had broken up about 400 meters from the crawler, and now there appeared to be turbulence in the sand around the factory. The worm is now beneath the crawler, Kynes said. You are about to witness a thing few have seen. Flecks of dust shadowed the sand around the crawler now. The big machine began to tip down to the right. A gigantic sand whirlpool began forming there to the right of the crawler. It moved faster and faster. Sand and dust filled the air now for hundreds of meters around. Then they saw it. A wide hole emerged from the sand. Sunlight flashed from glistening white spokes within it. The hole's diameter was at least twice the length of the crawler, Paul estimated. He watched as the machine slid into that opening in a billow of dust and sand. The hole pulled back. Good, what a monster, muttered a man beside Paul. Got all our flogging spice, growled another. Someone is going to pay for this, the Duke said. I promise you that. By the very flatness of his father's voice, Paul sensed the deep anger. He found that he shared it. This was criminal waste. In the silence that followed, they heard Kynes. Bless the Maker and his water, Kynes murmured. Bless the coming and going of him. May his passage cleanse the world. May he keep the world for his people. What's that you're saying? The Duke asked. But Kynes remained silent. Paul glanced at the men crowded around him. They were staring fearfully at the back of Kynes' head. One of them whispered, Yet. Kynes turned, scowling. The man sank back, abashed. Another of the rescued men began coughing, dry and rasping. Presently he gasped, "Curse this hellhole!" The tall Dune man who had come last out of the crawler said, "Be you still, Cos. You must worsen your cough." He stirred among the men until he could look through them at the back of the Duke's head. "You be the Duke Leto, I warrant," he said. "It's to you we give thanks for our lives. We were ready to end it there until you came along." "Quiet, man, and let the Duke fly this ship," Alec muttered. Paul glanced at Halleck. He too had seen the tension wrinkles at the corner of his father's jaw. One walked softly when the Duke was in a rage. Later began easing his thopter out of its great banking circle, stopped at a new sign of movement on the sand. The worm had withdrawn into the depths, and now, near where the crawler had been, two figures could be seen moving north, away from the sand depression. They appeared to glide over the surface with hardly a lifting of dust to mark their passage. "Who's that down there?" the Duke barked. "Two Johnnies who came along for the ride, sir," said the tall Dune man. "Why wasn't something said about them?" "It was a chance they took, sir," the Dune man said. "My lord," said Kynes, "these men know it's of little use to do anything about men trapped on the desert in Worm country." "We'll send a ship from base for them," the Duke snapped. "As you wish, my lord," Kynes said. "But likely when the ship gets here, there'll be no one to rescue." "We'll send a ship anyway," the Duke said. "They were right beside where the worm came up," Paul said. "How'd they escape?" "The sides of the hull cave in and make the distances deceptive," Kynes said. "You waste fuel here, sir," Halleck ventured. "Aye, Gurney." The Duke brought his craft around toward the shield wall. His escort came down from circling stations, took up positions above and on both sides. Paul thought about what the Dune man and Kynes had said. He sensed half-truths, outright lies. The men on the sand had glided across the surface so surely, moving in a way obviously calculated to keep from luring the worm back out of its depths. Fremen, Paul thought. Who else would be so sure on the sand? Who else might be left out of your worries as a matter of course, because they are in no danger? They know how to live here. They know how to outwit the worm. What were Fremen doing on that crawler? Paul asked. Kynes whirled. The tall Dune man turned wide eyes on Paul, blue within blue within blue. "Who be this lad?" he asked. Halleck moved to place himself between the man and Paul, said, "This is Paul Atreides, the ducal heir." "Why says he there were Fremen on our Rambler?" the man asked. "They fit the description," Paul said. Kynes snorted. "You can't tell Fremen just by looking at them." He looked at the Dune man. "You, who were those men?" "Friends of one of the others," the Dune man said. "Just friends from a village who wanted to see the spice sands." Kynes turned away. Fremen. But he was remembering the words of the legend. "The Lisan al-Gaib shall see through all subterfuge." "They be dead now, most likely, young sword," the Dune man said. "We should not speak unkindly on them." But Paul heard the falsehood in their voices, felt the menace that had brought Halleck instinctively into guarding position. Paul spoke dryly. "A terrible place for them to die." Without turning, Kynes said, "When God hath ordained a creature to die in a particular place, he causeth that creature's wants to direct him to that place." Leto turned a hard stare at Kynes, and Kynes, returning the stare, found himself troubled by a fact he had observed here. This Duke was concerned more over the men than he was over the spice. He risked his own life and that of his son to save the men. He passed off the loss of a spice crawler with a gesture. The threat to men's lives had him in a rage. A leader such as that would command fanatic loyalty. He would be difficult to defeat. Against his own will and all previous judgments, Kynes admitted to himself, "I like this Duke."
Yeah, man.
Greatness is a transitory experience. It is never consistent. It depends in part upon the myth-making imagination of humankind. The person who experiences greatness must have a feeling for the myth he is in. He must reflect what is projected upon him, and he must have a strong sense of the sardonic. This is what uncouples him from belief in his own pretensions. The sardonic is all that permits him to move within himself. Without this quality, even occasional greatness will destroy a man. From Collected Sayings of Muad'Dib by the Princess Irulan.
In the dining hall of the Arakeen Great House, suspenser lamps had been lighted against the early dark. They cast their yellow glows upward onto the black bull's head with its bloody horns, and onto the darkly glistening oil painting of the old duke. Beneath these talismans, white linen shone around the burnished reflections of the Atreides silver, which had been placed in precise arrangements along the great table, little archipelagos of service waiting behind crystal glasses, each setting squared off before a heavy wooden chair. The classic central chandelier remained unlighted, and its chain twisted upward into shadows where the mechanism of the poison snooper had been concealed. Pausing in the doorway to inspect the arrangements, the Duke thought about the poison snooper and what it signified in his society. All of a pattern, he thought. You can plumb us by our language, the precise and delicate delineations for ways to administer treacherous death. Will someone try chalmurky tonight, poison in the drink? Or will it be chalmers, poison in the food? He shook his head. Beside each plate on the long table stood a flagon of water. There was enough water along the table, the Duke estimated, to keep a poor Arakeen family for more than a year. Flanking the doorway in which he stood were broad laving basins of ornate yellow and green tile. Each basin had its rack of towels. It was the custom, the housekeeper had explained, for guests as they entered to dip their hands ceremoniously into a basin, slop several cups of water onto the floor, dry their hands on a towel, and fling the towel into the growing puddle at the door. After the dinner, beggars gathered outside to get the water squeezings from the towels. How typical of a Harkonnen fief, the Duke thought. Every degradation of the spirit that can be conceived. He took a deep breath, feeling rage tighten his stomach. The custom stops here, he muttered. He saw a serving woman, one of the old and gnarled ones the housekeeper had recommended, hovering at the doorway from the kitchen across from him. The Duke signalled with upraised hand. She moved out of the shadows, scurried around the table toward him, and he noted the leathery face, the blue within blue eyes. My lord wishes? She kept her head bowed, eyes shielded. He gestured. Have these basins and towels removed? But, noble lord. She looked up, mouth gaping. I know the custom, he barked. Take these basins to the front door. While we're eating and until we've finished, each beggar who calls may have a full cup of water. Understood? Her leathery face displayed a twisting of emotions. Dismay, anger. With sudden insight, later realized that she must have planned to sell the water squeezings from the foot-trampled towels, wringing a few coppers from the wretches who came to the door. Perhaps that also was a custom. His face clouded, and he growled, I'm posting a guard to see that my orders are carried out to the letter. He whirled, strode back down the passage to the great hall. Memories rolled in his mind like the toothless mutterings of old women. He remembered open water and waves, days of grass instead of sand, dazed summers that had whipped past him like windstorm leaves, all gone. I'm getting old, he thought. I've felt the cold hand of my mortality. And in what? An old woman's greed. In the great hall, the Lady Jessica was the centre of a mixed group standing in front of the fireplace. An open blaze crackled there, casting flickers of orange light onto jewels and laces and costly fabrics. He recognized in the group a stillsuit manufacturer down from Carthage, an electronics equipment importer, a water shipper whose summer mansion was near his polar cap factory, a representative of the Guild Bank. Lean and remote, that one. A dealer in replacement parts for spice mining equipment. A thin and hard-faced woman whose escort service for off-planet visitors reputedly operated as cover for various smuggling, spying, and blackmail operations. Most of the women in the hall seemed cast from a specific type. Decorative, precisely turned out, an odd mingling of untouchable sensuousness. Even without her position as hostess, Jessica would have dominated the group, he thought. She wore no jewelry and had chosen warm colours, a long dress, almost the shade of the open blaze, and an earth-brown band around her bronzed hair. He realized she had done this to taunt him subtly, a reproof against his recent pose of coldness. She was well aware that he liked her best in these shades, that he saw her as a rustling of warm colours. Nearby, more an outflanker than a member of the group, stood Duncan Idaho in glittering dress uniform, flat face unreadable, the curling black hair neatly combed. He had been summoned back from the Fremen and had his orders from Howard. Under pretext of guarding her, you will keep the Lady Jessica under constant surveillance. The Duke glanced around the room. There was Paul in the corner, surrounded by a fawning group of the younger Arakeen Richesse, and aloof among them, 3 officers of the house troop. The Duke took particular note of the young women. What a catch a ducal heir would make. But Paul was treating all equally with an air of reserved nobility. He'll wear the title well, the Duke thought, and realized with a sudden chill that this was another death thought. Paul saw his father in the doorway, avoided his eyes. He looked around at the clusterings of guests, the jeweled hands clutching drinks, and the unobtrusive inspections with tiny, remote-cast snoopers. Seeing all the chattering faces, Paul was suddenly repelled by them. They were cheap masks, locked on festering thoughts, voices gabbling to drown out the loud silence in every breast. I'm in a sour mood, he thought, and wondered what Gurney would say to that. He knew his mood's source. He hadn't wanted to attend this function, but his father had been firm. You have a place, a position to uphold. You're old enough to do this. You're almost a man. Paul saw his father emerge from the doorway, inspect the room, then cross to the group around Lady Jessica. As Leto approached Jessica's group, the water shipper was asking, "Is it true the Duke will put in weather control?" From behind the man, the Duke said, "We haven't gone that far in our thinking, sir." The man turned, exposing a bland, round face, darkly tanned. "Ah, the Duke," he said. "We missed you." Leto glanced at Jessica. A thing needed doing. He returned his attention to the water shipper, explained what he had ordered for the laving basins, adding, "As far as I'm concerned, the old custom ends now." "Is this a ducal order, my lord?" the man asked. "I leave that to your own conscience," the Duke said. He turned, noting Kynes come up to the group. One of the women said, "I think it's a very generous gesture, giving water to the..." Someone shushed her. The Duke looked at Kynes, noting that the planetologist wore an old-style dark brown uniform with epaulets of the Imperial Civil Servant and a tiny gold teardrop of rank at his collar. The water shipper asked in an angry voice, "Does the Duke imply criticism of our custom?" "The custom has been changed," Leto said. He nodded to Kynes, marked the frown on Jessica's face, thought, "The frown does not become her, but it raises rumours of friction between us." "With the Duke's permission," the water shipper asked, "I'd like to inquire further about customs." Leto heard a sudden, oily tone in the man's voice, and noted the watchful silence in this group, the way heads were beginning to turn toward them around the room. "Isn't it almost time for dinner?" Jessica asked. "But our guest has some questions," Leto said. And he looked at the water shipper, seeing a round-faced man with large eyes and thick lips, recalling Howard's memorandum. "And this water shipper is a man to watch. Lingard Butte, remember the name? The Harkonnens used him, but never fully controlled him." "Water customs are so interesting," Butte said, and there was a smile on his face. I'm curious what you intend about the conservatory attached to this house. Do you intend to continue flaunting it in the people's faces, my lord? Leto held anger in check, staring at the man. Thoughts raced through his mind. It had taken bravery to challenge him in his own ducal castle, especially since they now had Bute's signature over a contract of allegiance. The action had taken also a knowledge of personal power. Water was indeed power here. If water facilities were mined, for instance, ready to be destroyed as a signal, the man looked capable of such a thing. Destruction of water facilities might well destroy Arrakis. That could well have been the club this Butte held over the Harkonnens. My lord, the Duke and I have other plans for our conservatory, Jessica said. She smiled at Leto. We intend to keep it, certainly, but only to hold it in trust for the people of Arrakis. It is our dream that someday the climate of Arrakis may be changed sufficiently to grow such plants anywhere in the open. Bless her, Leto thought. Let our water shipper chew on that. Your interest in water and weather control is obvious, the Duke said. I'd advise you to diversify your holdings. One day, water will not be a precious commodity on Arrakis. And he thought, Howard must redouble his efforts at infiltrating this Bute's organization. And we must start on standby water facilities at once. No man is going to hold a club over my head. Butte nodded, the smile still on his face. A commendable dream, my lord. He withdrew a pace. Leto's attention was caught by the expression on Kynes' face. The man was staring at Jessica. He appeared transfigured, like a man in love, or caught in a religious trance. Kynes' thoughts were overwhelmed at last by the words of prophecy, and they shall share your most precious dream. He spoke directly to Jessica. Do you bring the shortening of the way? Ah, Dr. Kynes, the water shipper said. You've come in from tramping around with your mobs of Fremen. How gracious of you. Kynes passed an unreadable glance across Butte, said, It is said in the desert that possession of water in great amount can inflict a man with fatal carelessness. They have many strange sayings in the desert, Butte said, but his voice betrayed uneasiness. Jessica crossed to Leto, slipped her hand under his arm to gain a moment in which to calm herself. Kynes had said, the shortening of the way. In the old tongue, the phrase translated as Kwisatz Haderach. The planetologist's odd question seemed to have gone unnoticed by the others, and now Kynes was bending over one of the consort women, listening to a low-voiced coquetry. Kwisatz Haderach, Jessica thought. Did our Missionaria Protectiva plant that legend here too? The thought fanned her secret hope for Paul. He could be the Kwisatz Haderach. He could be. The Guild Bank representative had fallen into conversation with the water shipper, and Butte's voice lifted above the renewed hum of conversations. Many people have sought to change Arrakis. The Duke saw how the words seemed to pierce Kynes, jerking the planetologist upright and away from the flirting woman. In the sudden silence, a house trooper in uniform of a footman cleared his throat behind Leto, said, Dinner is served, my lord. The Duke directed a questioning glance down at Jessica. The custom here is for host and hostess to follow their guests to table, she said, and smiled. Shall we change that one too, my lord? He spoke coldly. That seems a goodly custom. We shall let it stand for now. The illusion that I suspect her of
A
treachery
goodly
must be
custom.
maintained, he
Wow.
thought. He glanced at the guests filing past them. Who among you believes this lie? Jessica, sensing his remoteness, wondered at it as she had done frequently the past week. He acts like a man struggling with himself, she thought. Is it because I moved so swiftly, setting up this dinner party? Yet he knows how important it is that we begin to mix our officers and men with the locals on a social plane. We are father and mother surrogate to them all. Nothing impresses that fact more firmly than this sort of social sharing. Leto watched the guests file past, recalled what Thuvir Howard had said when informed of the affair. "Sire, I forbid it." A grim smile touched the Duke's. What a scene that had been. And when the Duke had remained adamant about attending the dinner, Howard had shaken his head. "I have bad feelings about this, my lord," he said. "Things move too swiftly on Arrakis. That's not like the Harkonnens. Not like them at all." All passed his father escorting a young woman half a head taller than himself. He shot a sour glance at his father, nodded at something the young woman said. "Her father manufactures still suits," Jessica said. "I'm told that only a fool would be caught in the deep desert wearing one of the man's suits." "Who's the man with the scarred face ahead of Paul?" the Duke asked. "I don't place him." "A late addition to the list," she whispered. "Gurney arranged the invitation. Smuggler." "Gurney arranged?" "At my request. It was cleared with Howard, although I thought Howard was a little stiff about it. The smuggler's called Twig. Esma Twig. He's a power among his kind. They all know him here. He's dined at many of the houses." "Why is he here?" "Everyone here will ask that question," she said. "Twig will sow doubt and suspicion just by his presence. He'll also serve notice that you're prepared to back up your orders against graft by enforcement from the smuggler's end as well. This was the point Howard appeared to like." "I'm not sure I like it." He nodded to a passing couple, saw only a few of their guests remained to precede them. "Why didn't you invite some friends?" "There's Kynes," she said. "Yes, there's Kynes," he said. "Have you arranged any other little surprises for me?" He led her into step behind the procession. "All else is most conventional," she said. And she thought, "My darling, can't you see that this smuggler controls fast ships? That he can be bribed? We must have a way out. A door of escape from Arrakis, if all else fails us here." As they emerged into the dining hall, she disengaged her arm, allowed Leto to sit.
Damn.
He strode to his end of the table.
I missed
A
that.
footman held his chair for him. The others settled with a swishing of fabrics, a scraping of chairs, but the Duke remained standing. He gave a hand signal, and the house troopers in footman uniform around the table stepped back, standing at attention. Uneasy silence settled over the room. Jessica, looking down the length of the table, saw a faint trembling at the corners of Leto's mouth, noted the dark flush of anger on his cheeks. What has angered him? She asked herself. Surely not my invitation to the smuggler. "Some question my changing of the laving basin custom," Leto said. "This is my way of telling you that many things will change." Embarrassed silence settled over the table. They think him drunk, Jessica thought. Leto lifted his water flagon, held it aloft where the suspensor lights shot beams of reflection of it. "As a chevalier of the Imperium, then," he said, "I give you a toast." The others grasped their flagons, all eyes focused on the Duke. In the sudden stillness, a suspensor light drifted slightly in the errant breeze from the serving kitchen hallway. Shadows played across the Duke's hawk features. "Here I am, and here I remain," he barked. There was an abortive movement of flagons toward mouths, stopped as the Duke remained with arm upraised. "My toast is one of those maxims so dear to our hearts. Business makes progress. Fortune passes everywhere." He sipped his water. The others joined him, questioning glances passed among them. "Gurney!" the Duke called. From an alcove at Leto's end of the room came Halleck's voice. "Here, my lord. Give us a tune, Gurney." A minor chord from the balisette floated out of the alcove. Servants began putting plates of food on the table, at the Duke's gesture releasing them. Roast desert hare in sauce cepeda, oplamage Syriac, chuka under glass, coffee with melange. A rich cinnamon odor from the spice wafted across the table. A true otahui served with sparkling Caladan wine. Still, the Duke remained standing. As the guests waited, their attention torn between the dishes placed before them and the standing Duke, Leto said, In olden times, it was the duty of the host to entertain his guests with his own talents. His knuckles turned white, so fiercely did he grip his water flagon. I cannot sing, but I give you the words of Gurney's song. Consider it another toast, a toast to all who've died bringing us to this station. An uncomfortable stirring sounded around the table. Jessica lowered her gaze, glanced at the people seated nearest her. There was the round-faced water shipper and his woman, the pale and austere Guild Bank representative. He seemed a whistle-faced scarecrow, with his eyes fixed on later. The rugged and scar-faced Tuek, his blue-within-blue eyes downcast. Review, friends. Troops, long past review, the Duke intoned. All to fate a weight of pains and dollars. Their spirits wear our silver collars. Review, friends. Troops long past review. Each a dot of time without pretense or guile. With them passes the lure of fortune. Review, friends. Troops long past review. When our time ends on its Richter smile, we'll pass the lure of fortune. The Duke allowed his voice to trail off on the last line, took a deep drink from his water flagon, slammed it back onto the table. Water slopped over the brim onto the linen. The others drank in embarrassed silence. Again the Duke lifted his water flagon, and this time emptied its remaining half onto the floor, knowing that the others around the table must do the same. Jessica was first to follow his example. There was a frozen moment before the others began emptying their flagons. Jessica saw how Paul, seated near his father, was studying the reactions around him. She found herself also fascinated by what her guests' actions revealed, especially among the women. This was clean, potable water, not something already cast away in a sopping towel. Reluctance to just discard it exposed itself in trembling hands, delayed reactions, nervous laughter, and violent obedience to the necessity. One woman dropped her flagon, looked the other way as her male companion recovered it. Kynes, though, caught her attention most sharply. The planetologist hesitated, then emptied his flagon into a container beneath his jacket. He smiled at Jessica as he caught her watching him, raised the empty flagon to her in a silent toast. He appeared completely unembarrassed by his action. Halleck's music still wafted over the room, but it had come out of its minor key, lilting and lively now as though he were trying to lift the mood. "Let the dinner commence," the Duke said, and sank into his chair. He's angry and uncertain, Jessica thought. The loss of that factory crawler hit him more deeply than it should have. It must be something more than that loss. He acts like a desperate man. She lifted her fork, hoping in the motion to hide her own sudden bitterness. Why not? He is desperate. Slowly at first, then with increasing animation, the dinner got underway. The stillsuit manufacturer complimented Jessica on her chef and wine. "We brought both from Caladan," she said. "Superb," he said, tasting the chuka.
Super.
Not a hint of melange in it. One gets so tired of the spice and everything. The Guild Bank representative looked across at Kynes. "I understand, Dr. Kynes, that another factory crawler has been lost to a worm." "News travels fast," the Duke said. "Then it's true?" the banker asked, shifting his attention to later. "Of course it's true," the Duke snapped. "The blasted carryall disappeared. It shouldn't be possible for anything that big to disappear." "When the worm came, there was nothing to recover the crawler," Kynes said. "It should not be possible," the Duke repeated. "No one saw the carryall leave?" the banker asked. "Spotters customarily keep their eyes on the sand," Kynes said. "They're primarily interested in worm sign. A carryall's complement usually is 4 men, 2 pilots and 2 journeyman attachers. If one or even 2 of this crew were in the pay of the Duke's foes..." "Ah, I see," the banker said. "And you, as judge of the change, do you challenge this?" "I shall have to consider my position carefully," Kynes said. "And I certainly will not discuss it at table." and he thought, that pale skeleton of a man. He knows this is the kind of infraction I was instructed to ignore. The banker smiled, returned his attention to his food. Jessica sat remembering a lecture from her Bene Gesserit school days. The subject had been espionage and counter-espionage. A plump, happy-faced Reverend Mother had been the lecturer, her jolly voice contrasting weirdly with the subject matter. The thing to note about any espionage and or counter-espionage school is the similar basic reaction pattern of all its graduates. Any enclosed discipline sets its stamp, its pattern upon its students. That pattern is susceptible to analysis and prediction. Now, motivational patterns are going to be similar among all espionage agents. That is to say, there will be certain types of motivation that are similar despite differing schools or opposed aims. You will study first how to separate this element for your analysis. In the beginning, through interrogation patterns that betray the inner orientation of the interrogators. Secondly, by close observation of language-thought orientation of those under analysis. You will find it fairly simple to determine the root languages of your subjects, of course, both through voice inflection and speech pattern. Now, sitting at table with her son and her duke and their guests, hearing that guild bank representative, Jessica felt a chill of realization. The man was a Harkonnen agent. He had the Gaiety Prime speech pattern subtly masked, but exposed to her trained awareness as though he had announced himself. Does this mean the guild itself has taken sides against House Atreides? She asked herself. The thought shocked her, and she masked her emotion by calling for a new dish, all the while listening for the man to betray his purpose. He will shift the conversation next to something seemingly innocent, but with ominous overtones, she told herself. It's his pattern. The banker swallowed, took a sip of wine, smiled at something said to him by the woman on his right. He seemed to listen for a moment to a man down the table who was explaining to the Duke that native Arakean plants had no thorns. I enjoyed watching the flights of birds on Arrakis, the banker said, directing his words at Jessica. All of our birds, of course, are carrion eaters, and many exist without water, having become blood drinkers. The stillsuit manufacturer's daughter, seated between Paul and his father at the other end of the table, twisted her pretty face into a frown and said, "Oh, Susu, you say the most disgusting things." The banker smiled. They call me Susu because I'm financial advisor to the Water Peddlers Union. And as Jessica continued to look at him without comment, he added, because of the water seller's cry, Susu Sook. And he imitated the call with such accuracy that many around the table laughed. Jessica heard the boastful tone of voice, but noted most that the young woman had spoken on cue. A set piece. She had produced the excuse for the banker to say what he had said. She glanced at Vingar Butte. The water magnate was scowling, concentrating on his dinner. It came to Jessica that the banker had said, I, too, controlled that ultimate source of power on Arrakis, water. Paul had marked the falseness in his dinner companion's voice, saw that his mother was following the conversation with Bene Gesserit intensity. On impulse, he decided to play the foil, draw the exchange out. He addressed himself to the banker. Do you mean, sir, that these birds are cannibals? That's an odd question, young master, the banker said. I merely said the birds drink blood. It doesn't have to be the blood of their own kind, does it? It was not an odd question, Paul said. And Jessica noted the brittle riposte quality of her training exposed in his voice. Most educated people know that the worst potential competition for any young organism can come from its own kind. He deliberately forked a bite of food from his companion's plate, ate it. They are eating from the same bowl. They have the same basic requirements. The banker stiffened, scowled at the Duke. Do not make the error of considering my son a child, the Duke said, and he smiled. Jessica glanced around the table, noting that Butte had brightened, that both Kynes and the smuggler Tuek were grinning. It's a rule of ecology, Kynes said, that the young master appears to understand quite well. For the struggle between life elements is the struggle for the free energy of a system. Blood's an efficient energy source. The banker put down his fork, spoke in an angry voice. It's said that the Fremens come drink the blood of their dead. Kynes shook his head, spoke in a lecturing tone. Not the blood, sir, but all of a man's water ultimately belongs to his people, to his tribe. It's a necessity when you live near the Great Flat. All water's precious there, and the human body is composed of some 70% water by weight. A dead man, surely, no longer requires that water. The banker put both hands against the table beside his plate, and Jessica thought he was going to push himself back, leave in a rage. Kynes looked at Jessica. Forgive me, my lady, for elaborating on such an ugly subject at table, but you were being told falsehood, and it needed clarifying. You've associated so long with Fremen that you've lost all sensibilities, the banker rasped. Kynes looked at him calmly, studied the pale, trembling face. Are you challenging me, sir? The banker froze. He swallowed, spoke stiffly.
Damn.
Of course not. I'd not so insult our host and hostess. Jessica heard the fear in the man's voice, saw it in his face, in his breathing, in the pulse of a vein at his temple. The man was terrified of Kynes.
Yep.
Our host and hostess are quite capable of deciding for themselves when they've been insulted, Kynes said. They're brave people who understand defense of honor. We all may attest to their courage by the fact that they are here, now, on Arrakis. Jessica saw that Leto was enjoying this. Most of the others were not. People around the table sat poised for flight, hands out of sight under the table.
New leadership.
Two notable exceptions were Butte, who was openly smiling at the banker's discomfiture,
Gotta clean
and
out the
stolid
dirtbags.
Hewitt, who appeared to be watching Kynes for a cue. Jessica saw that Paul was looking at Kynes in admiration. Well, Kynes said. I meant no offense, the banker muttered. If offense was taken, please accept my apologies. Freely given, freely accepted, Kynes said. He smiled at Jessica, resumed eating as though nothing had happened. Jessica saw that the smuggler, too, had relaxed. She marked this. The man had shown every respect of an aide ready to leap to Kynes' assistance. There existed an accord of some sort between Kynes and Tuick. Leto toyed with a fork, looked speculatively at Kynes. The ecologist's manner indicated a change in attitude toward the House of Atreides. Kynes had seemed colder on their trip over the desert. Jessica signaled for another course of food and drink. Servants appeared with langue de lapin de Garenne, red wine, and a sauce of mushroom yeast on the side. Slowly, the dinner conversation resumed, but Jessica heard the agitation in it, the brittle quality, saw that the banker ate in sullen silence. Kynes would have killed him without hesitating, she thought. And she realized that there was an offhand attitude toward killing in Kynes' manner. He was a casual killer, and she guessed that this was a Fremen quality. Jessica turned to the stillsuit manufacturer on her left, said, I find myself continually amazed by the importance of water on Arrakis. Very important, he agreed. What is this dish? It's delicious. Tongues of wild rabbit in a special sauce, she said. A very old recipe. I must have that recipe, the man said. She nodded. I'll see that you get it. Kynes looked at Jessica, said, the newcomer to Arrakis frequently underestimates the importance of water here. You are dealing, you see, with the law of the minimum. She heard the testing quality in his voice, said, growth is limited by that necessity which is present in the least amount, and, naturally, the least favourable condition controls the growth rate. It's rare to find members of a great house aware of planetological problems, Kynes said. Water is the least favourable condition for life on Arrakis. And remember that growth itself can produce unfavourable conditions unless treated with extreme care. Jessica sensed the hidden message in Kynes' words, but knew she was missing it. Growth, she said. Do you mean Arrakis can have an orderly cycle of water to sustain human life under more favorable conditions? Impossible, the water magnate barked. Jessica turned her attention to Butte. Impossible? Impossible on Arrakis, he said. Don't listen to this dreamer. All the laboratory evidence is against him. Kynes looked at Butte, and Jessica noted that the other conversations around the table had stopped, while people concentrated on this new interchange. Laboratory evidence tends to blind us to a very simple fact, Kynes said. That fact is this. We are dealing here with matters that originated and exist out of doors, where plants and animals carry on their normal existence. Normal? Butte snorted. Nothing about Arrakis is normal. Quite the contrary, Kynes said. Certain harmonies could be set up here along self-sustaining lines. You merely have to understand the limits of the planet and the pressures upon it. It'll never be done, Butte said. The Duke came to a sudden realization, placing the point where Kynes' attitude had changed. It had been when Jessica had spoken of holding the conservatory plants in trust for Arrakis. What would it take to set up the self-sustaining system, Dr. Kynes? Plato asked. If we can get 3% of the green plant element on Arrakis involved in forming carbon compounds as foodstuffs, we've started the cyclic system, Kynes said. Water's the only problem? The Duke asked. He sensed Kynes' excitement, felt himself caught up in it. Water overshadows the other problems, Kynes said. This planet has much oxygen without its usual concomitants. Widespread plant life and large sources of free carbon dioxide from such phenomena as volcanoes. There are unusual chemical interchanges over large surface areas here. Do you have pilot projects? The Duke asked. We've had a long time in which to build up the Tansley effect, small unit experiments on an amateur basis from which my science may now draw its working facts, Kynes said. There isn't enough water, Butte said. There just isn't enough water. Master Butte is an expert on water, Kynes said. He smiled, turned back to his dinner. The Duke gestured sharply down with his right hand, barked. No, I want an answer. Is there enough water, Dr. Kynes? Kynes stared at his plate. Jessica watched the play of emotion on his face. He masks himself well, she thought. But she had him registered now and read that he regretted his words. Is there enough water? The Duke demanded. There may be, Kynes said. He's faking uncertainty, Jessica thought. With his deeper truth sense, Paul caught the underlying motive, had to use every ounce of his training to mask his excitement. There is enough water, but Kynes doesn't wish it to be known. Our planetologist has many interesting dreams, Butte said. He dreams with the Fremen of prophecies and messiahs. Chuckles sounded at odd places around the table. Jessica marked them. The smuggler, the stillsuit manufacturer's daughter, Duncan, Idaho, the woman with the mysterious escort service.
Mysterious escort service.
Jessica thought. There's too much going on of which I'm not aware. I'll have to develop new information sources. The Duke passed his gaze from Kynes to Butte to Jessica. He felt oddly let down, as though something vital had passed him here. Maybe, he muttered. Kynes spoke quickly. Perhaps we should discuss this another time, my lord. There are so many... The planetologist broke off as a uniformed Atreides trooper hurried in through the service door, was passed by the guard and rushed to the Duke's side. The man bent, whispering into Leto's ear. Jessica recognized the cat sign of Howard's corps, fought down uneasiness. She addressed herself to the stillsuit manufacturer's feminine companion, a tiny, dark-haired woman with a doll face, a touch of epicanthic fold to the eyes. You've hardly touched your dinner, my dear, Jessica said. May I order you something? The woman looked at the stillsuit manufacturer before answering. Then, I'm not very hungry. Abruptly, the Duke stood up beside his trooper, spoke in a harsh tone of command. Stay seated, everyone. You will have to forgive me, but a matter has arisen that requires my personal attention. He stepped aside. Paul, take over as host for me, if you please. Paul stood, wanting to ask why his father had to leave, knowing he had to play this with the grand man. He moved around to his father's chair, sat down.
Oh
The
shit.
Duke turned to the alcove where Halleck sat, said, Gurney, please take Paul's place at table. We mustn't have an odd number here. When the dinner's over, I may want you to bring Paul to the field CP. Wait for my call. Halleck emerged from the alcove in dress uniform, his lumpy ugliness seeming out of place in the glittering finery. He leaned his balisette against the wall, crossed to the chair Paul had occupied, sat down. There's no need for alarm, the Duke said, but I must ask that no one leave until our house guard says it's safe. You will be perfectly secure as long as you remain here, and we'll have this little trouble cleared up very shortly.
Holy shit.
Paul caught the code words in his father's message. Guard, safe, secure, shortly. The problem was security, not violence. He saw that his mother had read the same message. They both relaxed. The Duke gave a short nod, wheeled, and strode through the service door, followed by his trooper. Paul said, Please go on with your dinner. I believe Dr. Kynes was discussing water. May we discuss it another time? Kynes asked. By all means, Paul said. And Jessica noted with pride her son's dignity, the mature sense of assurance. The banker picked up his water flagon, gestured with it at Bute. None of us here can surpass Master Lingard Bute in flowery phrases. One might almost assume he aspired to great house status. Come, Master Bute, lead us in a toast. Perhaps you a dollop of wisdom for the boy who must be treated like a man. Jessica clenched her right hand into a fist beneath the table.
Yeah, that man acting
She
like
saw
a jerk.
hand signal pass from Halleck to Idaho, saw the house troopers along the walls move into positions of maximum guard. Bute cast a venomous glare at the banker. Paul glanced at Halleck, took in the defensive positions of his guards, looked at the banker until the man lowered the water flagon. He said, Once, on Caladan, I saw the body of a drowned fisherman recovered. He drowned? It was the stillsuit manufacturer's daughter. Paul hesitated, then, Yes, immersed in water until dead. Drowned.
Immersed in water until
An
dead.
interesting way to die, she murmured. Paul's smile became brittle. He returned his attention to the banker. The interesting thing about this man was the wounds on his shoulders, made by another fisherman's claw boots. This fisherman was one of several in a boat, a craft for travelling on water, that foundered, sank beneath the water. Another fisherman helping recover the body said he'd seen marks like this man's wounds several times. They meant another drowning fisherman had tried to stand on this poor fellow's shoulders in the attempt to reach up to the surface, to reach air.
Damn.
Why is this interesting? The banker asked. Because of an observation made by my father at the time. He said, the drowning man who climbs on your shoulders to save himself is understandable, except when you see it happen in the drawing room. Paul hesitated just long enough for the banker to see the point coming. Then, and, I should add, except when you see it at the dinner table. A sudden stillness enfolded the room.
Oh shit.
That was rash, Jessica thought.
Yeah.
This banker might have enough rank to call my son out. She saw that Idaho was poised for instant action. The house troopers were alert. Gurney Halleck had his eyes on the man opposite him.
Damn.
It was the smuggler, Tuek, head thrown back, laughing with complete abandon.
Tight.
Nervous smiles appeared around the table. Bute was grinning. The banker had pushed his chair back, was glaring at Paul. Kynes said, One baits an Atreides at his own risk. Is it Atreides' custom to insult their guests? The banker demanded. Before Paul could answer, Jessica leaned forward and said, Sir. And she thought, we must learn this Harkonnen creature's game.
Yep.
Is he here to try for Paul? Does he have help? My son displays a general garment, and you claim it's cut to your fit? Jessica asked. What a fascinating revelation. She slid a hand down to her leg, to the crisp knife she had fastened in a cuff sheath. The banker turned his glare on Jessica. Eyes shifted away from Paul, and she saw him ease himself back from the table, freeing himself for action. He had focused on the code word, garment. Prepare for violence. Kynes directed a speculative look at Jessica, gave a subtle hand signal to Tuek. The smuggler lurched to his feet, lifted his flagon.
I'll give you a toast, he said, to young Paul Atreides. Still a lad by his looks, but a man by his actions.
Why do they intrude? Jessica asked her son. The banker stared now at Kynes, and Jessica saw terror return to the agent's face. People began responding all around the table. Where Kynes leads, people follow, Jessica thought. He has told us he sides with Paul. What's the secret of his power? It can't be because he's judge of the change. That's temporary, and certainly not because he's a civil servant. She removed her hand from the crisp knife hilt, lifted her flagon to Kynes, who responded in kind. Only Paul and the banker, Susu, what an idiotic nickname, Jessica thought, remained empty-handed. The banker's attention stayed fixed on Kynes. Paul stared at his plate. I was handling it correctly, Paul thought. Why do they interfere? He glanced covertly at the male guests nearest him. Prepare for violence? From whom? Certainly not from that banker fellow. Halleck stirred, spoke as though to no one in particular, directing his words over the heads of the guests across from him. In our society, people shouldn't be quick to take offense. It's frequently suicidal. He looked at the stillsuit manufacturer's daughter beside him.
Damn.
Don't you think so, miss? Oh, yes. Yes, indeed I do, she said. There's too much violence. It makes me sick. And lots of times no offense is meant, but people die anyway. It doesn't make sense. Indeed it doesn't, Halleck said.
Wow.
Jessica saw the near perfection of the girl's act, realized that empty-headed little female is not an empty-headed little female.
Yeah, that bitch is smart.
She saw then the pattern of the threat and understood that Halleck too had detected it. They had planned to lure Paul with sex. Jessica relaxed. Her son had probably been the first to see it. His training hadn't overlooked that obvious gambit. Kynes spoke to the banker. Isn't another apology in order? The banker turned a sickly grin toward Jessica, said, My lady, I fear I've overindulged in your wines. You serve potent drink at table, and I'm not accustomed to it. Jessica heard the venom beneath his tone, spoke sweetly. When strangers meet, great allowance should be made for differences of custom and training. Thank you, my lady, he said. The dark-haired companion of the stillsuit manufacturer leaned toward Jessica, said, The Duke spoke of our being secure here. I do hope that doesn't mean more fighting. She was directed to lead the conversation this way, Jessica thought. Likely this will prove unimportant, Jessica said, but there's so much detail requiring the Duke's personal attention in these times. As long as enmity continues between Atreides and Harkonnen, we cannot be too careful. The Duke has sworn calmly. He will leave no Harkonnen agent alive on Arrakis, of course. She glanced at the Guild Bank agent, and the conventions naturally support him in this. She shifted her attention to Kynes. Is this not so, Dr. Kynes? Indeed it is, Kynes said. The stillsuit manufacturer pulled his companion gently back. She looked at him, said, I do believe I'll eat something now. I'd like some of that bird dish you served earlier. Jessica signaled a servant, turned to the banker. And you, sir, were speaking of birds earlier and of their habits. I find so many interesting things about Arrakis. Tell me, where is the spice found? Do the hunters go deep into the desert? Oh no, my lady, he said. Very little's known of the deep desert, and almost nothing of the southern regions. There's a tale that a great motherlode of spices were found in the southern reaches, Kynes said. But I suspect it was an imaginative invention, made solely for purposes of a song. Some daring spice hunters do on occasion penetrate into the edge of the central belt, but that's extremely dangerous. Navigation is uncertain. Storms are frequent. Casualties increase dramatically the farther you operate from shield wall bases. It hasn't been found profitable to venture too far south. Perhaps if we had a weather satellite. Butte looked up, spoke around a mouthful of food. Instead, the Fremen travel there, but they go anywhere and have hunted out soaks and sipwells even in the southern latitudes. Soaks and sipwells? Jessica asked. Kynes spoke quickly. Wild rumors, my lady. These are known on other planets, not on Arrakis. A soak is a place where water seeps to the surface, or near enough to the surface to be found by digging according to certain signs. A sip well is a form of soak where a person draws water through a straw. So it is said. There's deception in his words, Jessica thought. Why is he lying? Paul wondered. How very interesting, Jessica said. And she thought, it is said. What a curious speech mannerism they have here. If they only knew what it reveals about their dependence on superstitions. I've heard you have a saying, Paul said, that polish comes from the cities, wisdom from the desert. There are many sayings on Arrakis, Kynes said. Before Jessica could frame a new question, a servant bent over her with a note. She opened it, saw the Duke's handwriting and code signs, scanned it. You'll all be delighted to know, she said, that our Duke sends his reassurances. The matter which called him away has been settled. The missing carryall has been found. A Harkonnen agent in the crew overpowered the others and flew the machine to a smuggler's base, hoping to sell it there. Both man and machine were turned over to our forces. She nodded to
Oh yeah, because they trying to look at people's reaction.
Jessica refolded the note, tucked it into her sleeve. I'm glad it didn't come to open battle, the banker said. The people have such hopes the Atreides will bring peace and prosperity. Especially prosperity, Butte said. Shall we have our dessert now? Jessica asked. I've had our chef prepare a Caladan sweet, pongy rice in sauce dolster. It sounds wonderful, the stillsuit manufacturer said. Would it be possible to get the recipe? Any recipe you desire, Jessica said, registering the man for later mention to Howard. The stillsuit manufacturer was a fearful little climber and could be bought. Small talk resumed around her. Such a lovely fabric. He's having a setting made to match the jewel. We might try for a production increase next quarter. Jessica stared down at her plate, thinking of the coded part of Leto's message. The Harkonnens tried to get in a shipment of laser guns. We captured them. This may mean they succeeded with other shipments. It certainly means they don't place much store in shields. Take appropriate precautions. Jessica focused her mind on laser guns, wondering. The white-hot beams of disruptive light could cut through any known substance, provided that substance was not shielded. The fact that feedback from a shield would explode both laser gun and shield did not bother the Harkonnens. Why? A laser gun shield explosion was a dangerous variable. Could be more powerful than atomics. Could kill only the gunner and his shielded target. The unknowns here filled her with uneasiness. Paul said, I've never doubted we'd find the carryall. Once my father moves to solve a problem, he solves it. This is a fact the Harkonnens are beginning to discover. He's boasting, Jessica thought. He shouldn't boast. No person who will be sleeping far below ground level this night as a precaution against laser guns has the right to boast.
There is no escape. We pay for the violence of our ancestors. From the collected sayings of Muad'Dib by the Princess Irulan.
Jessica heard the disturbance in the great hall, turned on the light beside her bed. The clock there had not been properly adjusted to local time, and she had to subtract 21 minutes to determine that it was about 2 a.m. The disturbance was loud and incoherent. Is this the Harkonnen attack? She wondered. She slipped out of bed, checked the screen monitors to see where her family was. The screen showed Paul asleep in the deep cellar room they'd hastily converted to a bedroom for him. The noise obviously wasn't penetrating.
Oh yeah, I should probably say something about like when I was listening to this audiobook in the beginning before I started streaming, because we were kind of already well into the story by the time I started streaming. In a previous recording, previous stream, I'd said like, oh, did the Hark, spoilers and all that. Did the Baron Harkonnen being Jessica's dad, like I was like, when was that ever discussed? When was that like ever a thing? Because it seemed to come out of nowhere. In the beginning of the story, it said that Jessica's dad, or it said that Paul's maternal grandfather has to remain unnamed. And I never caught that in the million times I've listened to this story. And I was like, oh, okay. At least it's hinted towards, that like a Chekhov's gun. It's like, obviously people have grandparents on both their dad and mom's side, but, the fact that the story specifically pointed out, like, oh, Paul's maternal grandfather has to remain unnamed. And then it gets revealed later on in later books, and becomes a major plot point. That's that was kind of the thing I was talking about in the previous stream of like, why did that come out of nowhere? It didn't. I just clearly don't listen enough. But yeah, because I don't know, it just popped back into my head, and I was like, oh yeah, no, I didn't discuss that or mention that or anything like that, but it happened. And I learned like, oh, okay, so it's not completely out of nowhere. Like it was already like, seeded in the beginning of the first book, which is impressive.
There was no one in the Duke's room. His bed was unrumpled. Was he still at the field CP? There were no screens yet to the front of the house. Jessica stood in the middle of her room, listening. There was one shouting, incoherent voice. She heard someone call for Dr. Yui. Jessica found a robe, pulled it over her shoulders, pushed her feet into slippers, strapped the crisp knife to her leg. Again a voice called out for Yui. Jessica belted the robe around her, stepped into the hallway. Then the thought struck her, what if Leto's hurt? The hall seemed to stretch out forever under her running feet. She turned through the arch at the end, dashed past the dining hall and down the passage to the great hall, finding the place brightly lighted, all the wall suspensors glowing at maximum. To her right, near the front entry, she saw two house guards holding Duncan Idaho between them.
Oh,
His
shit.
head lolled forward, and there was an abrupt, panting silence to the scene. One of the house guards spoke accusingly to Idaho. You see what you did? You woke the Lady Jessica. The great draperies billowed behind the men, showing that the front door remained open. There was no sign of the Duke or Yui. Mapes stood to one side, staring coldly at Idaho. She wore a long brown robe with serpentine design at the hem. Her feet were pushed into unlaced desert boots. So I woke the Lady Jessica, Idaho muttered. He lifted his face toward the ceiling, bellowed, my sword was first blooded on Grumman. Great mother, he's drunk, Jessica thought. Idaho's dark, round face was drawn into a frown. His hair, curling like the fur of a black goat, was plastered with dirt. A jagged rent in his tunic exposed an expanse of the dress shirt he had worn at the dinner party earlier. Jessica crossed to him. One of the guards nodded to her without releasing his hold on Idaho. We didn't know what to do with him, my lady. He was creating a disturbance out front, refusing to come inside. We were afraid locals might come along and see him. That wouldn't do at all. Give us a bad name here. Where has he been? Jessica asked. He escorted one of the young ladies home from the dinner, my lady. Palace orders. Which young lady? One of the escort wenches. You
Ooh.
understand, my lady? He glanced at Mapes, lowered his voice. They're always calling on Idaho for special surveillance of the ladies. And Jessica thought, so they are. But why is he drunk? She frowned, turned to Mapes. Mapes, bring a stimulant. I'd suggest caffeine. Perhaps there's some of the spice coffee left. Mapes shrugged, headed for the kitchen. Her unlaced desert boots slapped against the stone floor. Idaho swung his unsteady head around to peer at an angle toward Jessica. "Kills more than 300 men for the Duke," he muttered. "What I want to know is why Mimir can't live under the ground here. Can't live on the ground here. What kind of place is this, huh?"
Damn.
A sound from the side hall entrance.
Idaho's
caught
drunk
Jessica's
as
attention.
fuck.
She turned, saw Yui crossing to them, his medical kit swinging in his left hand. He was fully dressed, looked pale, exhausted. The diamond tattoo stood out sharply on his forehead. "The good doctor!" Idaho shouted. "How are you, Doc? Splitting pill man?" He turned blearily toward Jessica. "Making a damn fool of myself, huh?" Jessica frowned, remained silent, wondering, why would Idaho get drunk? Was he drugged? "Too much spiced beer," Idaho said, attempting to straighten. Mapes returned with a steaming cup in her hands, stopped uncertainly behind Yui. She looked at Jessica, who shook her head. Yui put his feet on the floor, nodded greeting to Jessica, and said, "Spiced beer, eh?" "Best damn stuff ever tasted," Idaho said.
Sorry.
He tried to pull himself to attention. "My soul was first blooded on Grumman. Kill a Harkin. Harkin? Kill him for the Duke." Yui turned, looked at the cup in Mapes' hand. "What is that?" "Caffeine," Jessica said. Yui took the cup, held it toward Idaho. "Drink this, lad." "Don't want any more to drink." "Drink it, I say." Idaho's head wobbled toward Yui, and he stumbled one step ahead, dragging the guards with him. "I'm almighty fed up with pleasing the Imperial Universe, Doc. Just once, we're gonna do the thing my way." "After you drink this," Yui said. "It's just caffeine." "It's probably like all the rest of this place. Damn sun's too bright. Nothing has the right colour. Everything's wrong, or..." "Well, it's night time now," Yui said. He spoke reasonably. "Drink this like a good lad. It'll make you feel better." "Don't want to feel better." "We can't argue with him all night," Jessica said. And she thought, this calls for shock treatment. "There's no reason for you to stay, my lady," Yui said. "I can take care of this." Jessica shook her head. She stepped forward, slapped Idaho sharply across the cheek. He stumbled back, his guards glaring at her. "This is no way to act in your Duke's home," she said. She snatched the cup from Yui's hands, spilling part of it, thrust the cup toward Idaho. "Now drink this. That's an order." Idaho jerked himself upright, scowling down at her. He spoke slowly, with careful and precise enunciation. "I do not take orders from a damn Harkonnen spy."
Damn.
Yui stiffened, whirled to face Jessica. Her face had gone pale, but she was
Oh.
It all became clear to her. The broken stems of meaning she had seen in words and actions around her these past few days could now be translated. She found herself in the grip of anger almost too great to contain. It took the most profound of her Bene Gesserit training to quiet her pulse and smooth her breathing. Even then she could feel the blaze flickering. They were always calling on Idaho for surveillance of the ladies. She shot a glance at Yui. The doctor lowered his eyes. "You knew this?" she demanded. "I heard rumors, my lady, but I didn't want to add to your burdens." "Howard," she snapped. "I want Thuvir Howard brought to me immediately." "But my lady..." "Immediately." It has to be Howard, she thought. Suspicion such as this could come from no other source without being discarded immediately. Idaho shook his head, mumbled, "Chuck the whole damn thing." Jessica looked down at the cup in her hand, abruptly dashed its contents across Idaho's face. "Lock him in one of the guest rooms of the East Wing," she ordered. "Let him sleep it off." The two guards stared at her unhappily. One ventured, "Perhaps we should take him someplace else, my lady. We could—" "He's supposed to be here," Jessica snapped. "He has a job to do here." Her voice dripped with bitterness. "He's so good at watching the ladies." Stopped. "Do you know where the Duke is?" she demanded. "He's at the command post, my lady." "Is Howard with him?" "Howard's in the city, my lady." "You will bring Howard to me at once," Jessica said. "I will be in my sitting room when he arrives." "But, my lady—" "If necessary, I will call the Duke," she said. "I hope it will not be necessary. I would not want to disturb him with this." "Yes, my lady." Jessica thrust the empty cup into Mapes' hands, met the questioning stare of the blue within blue eyes. "You may return to bed, Mapes." "You're sure you'll not need me?" Jessica smiled grimly. "I'm sure." "Perhaps this could wait until tomorrow," Yui said. "I could give you a sedative and—" "You will return to your quarters and leave me to handle this my way," she said. She patted his arm to take the sting out of her command. "This is the only way." Abruptly, head high, she turned and stalked off through the house to her rooms. Cold walls, passages, a familiar door. She jerked the door open, strode in, and slammed it behind her. Jessica stood there, glaring at the shield-blanked windows of her sitting room. Howard! Could he be the one the Harkonnens bought? We shall see. Jessica crossed to the deep, old-fashioned armchair with an embroidered cover of Schlag skin, moved the chair into position to command the door. She was suddenly very conscious of the crysknife in its sheath on her leg. She removed the sheath and strapped it to her arm, tested the drop of it. Once more.
All right. Well, as promised, we got one down. It's hella work to get all this. How long have we been streaming? Like 2.5, 3 hours. Fuck. Been streaming for 3 hours. Got one gun. That's what I was saying. I don't know if I'll be able to get 3. Not even just because of me just being a bum. Just because I knew this is an exceedingly lot of work to do. To break these down, rendering them is getting a little bit easier for me. You know, most of the time, you know, a lot of these shapes are becoming familiar and things like that. So yeah, man, it's either way, it's still a ton of work. As familiar as it gets, you know, the more custom pieces like here and all of these, that's where a lot of the attention goes to, just because it's, you know, synonymous or not synonymous, it's the other word, solely associated with this particular weapon. So yeah, you know, you'll find like little details that don't exist elsewhere. So you know, those are the things that take most of the time. But either way, I'll be back later on tonight to do the next video, and yeah, I'm guessing it'll be another 3-hour video. At which point, I don't know if I'll have time for a third stream. That might be one that I'll just do tomorrow, and I'll try to get to it sooner rather than later, if that's the case. But yeah, man, other than that, I want to thank everyone for watching. Kopagoy, thanks for stopping by. Thanks for the follow and all that other stuff, man. It was good talking. And yeah, man, just like we were discussing, man, just do what you're comfortable with, and then slowly branch out from there. And you know, your creativity is going to be different from other people's creativity, and so your designs will sooner or later just be yours straight up. And yeah, man, I wish you the best on your stuff. You know, we're two guys doing the same exact thing. Well, I don't know if you're a guy, but you know, we're two people doing the same thing. And yeah, man, it's good to know that other people have the same thoughts as I do, and you know, maybe this whole endeavor that I'm going through, and you know, this whole mission I'm trying to accomplish is will be able to speak to people. You know, part of me thinks that I'm crazy trying to do all this work, but but again, it's kind of like a magnum opus for the rest of my life to be working on something like this, have my work speak for itself and feed itself, and yeah, to know that other people also want to do that, and to be able to try to give them some sort of coolness that, you know, if I can do it, you could do it, sort of thing. Anyways, I'll be back in a little bit to do another one. Obviously, I don't even know how deep into this Dune video. We're probably only halfway, just over halfway through this book. So, through the first half of this book. I mean, this is a giant book, man. It's so good, though. Anyways, it's going to be it. I'm G Mr. Drew, at G Mr. Drew on all socials. Follow, like, and subscribe. Links are in bio, along with my website, gmrdrew.art. Check that out. You can contact me through there. And if you wish to support me and everything that I'm doing here, you know, these are just studies, so these aren't exactly the actual works and stuff like that. These are more along with like sketches and, you know, non-original work. But still, if you wish to support me, I'm on Patreon, starting at $1 a month, but starting at $3, you can get commissions from me, and there are multiple tiers, and they all go up from there. And you know, there are tons of offers there. I work, you know, small, large characters, props, environments. I mean, anything and everything you may want. You know, I do that. Tend to focus on characters though. So if you have like original characters and things like that, I'll be down to draw them, man. Anyways, oh yeah, you could also catch me on Fiverr if you want to just straight up hire me for some freelance. But yeah, that's gonna be it. I'll be back in a bit, man. Love y'all. Peace.